Mic check 1 2. It's the Y2K collector. And is the retro gaming crash here? Has the retro gaming market started to crash? I want to talk about that real quick because I saw a video that was put out by someone. I can't remember their name right now, but they basically put out a video hypothesizing why they felt like the retro gaming crash was starting to happen. And they used a few indicators that I myself have seen, but they also really looked at what was happening with a lot of the more popular retro gaming YouTube resellers, right? So they looked at people like Phoenix Resale, Chase After the Right Price, Retro Rick, people like that, and kind of made some of their, used kind of what they're doing to pretty much come up with their assessment of the retro gaming market. And there were a lot of things in that video that I agreed with, and a couple things that I didn't agree with. So overall, in my opinion, I do not think that there is a overall retro gaming market crash. I don't think the retro gaming market is crashing, at least not yet. But I do think that there is definitely some softening happening when it comes to certain platforms, certain retro gaming platforms, certain consoles, certain games. I do think that there is very much a softening, right? But what this all boils down to at the end of the day is supply and demand. And if you want to take it a step further, is who is demanding certain types of supply. So I would say that in general, like on average, resellers probably carry a good chunk of the retro gaming market. Even to this day in 2025, resellers are still a huge part of the reason why retro gaming prices are propped up, especially when you look at more rare games, more desirable games, just the kind of niche games, the titles that you don't see too often. A big part of what's keeping those games alive are your resellers, because when they see these games, they know how desirable these games are. They know how much they can probably get for these games. And a lot of times they're willing to pay up on some of these games, knowing that when they go to sell them themselves, they're going to list them at the top of market value. And so I think when it comes to those games, of course, they're gonna hold their value. I think when it comes to other games, when it comes to other consoles, if it's something that resellers just are not interested in, I think those are the consoles, those are the games that you will see dropping the fastest. So what are resellers not into these days? I can tell you right now, most resellers are not into PlayStation 4. Most resellers are not into PlayStation 3. Most resellers are also kind of starting to shy away from the 360 again. The 360 used to be in the same bucket as the PlayStation 3, but then we had that major Xbox 360 run in like 2022 or 2023, and the 360 gained some steam, but it's pretty much falling back into that PS3 bucket. So I can tell you right now, at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of reseller desirability, PlayStation 4 games, PlayStation 3 games, and Xbox 360 games just are not at the top of the food chain. Those are probably, in my opinion, the three bottom. What are the three top or most desired games or consoles? I would say probably GameCube still, Super Nintendo still, and probably Nintendo. Mostly Nintendo cartridge-based consoles. So if it's a Nintendo cartridge-based console, that is a reseller's, they lick their chops when they see that type of stuff. And then you have kind of everything in between. Like everything, in my opinion, from a reseller standpoint, falls in between. If resellers come across Sega CD games, they'll bite because they know that there's a niche market for Sega CD games. They know that there's a niche market for Sega Saturn games. I do think that there is some softening in the PlayStation 2 market. I think it's still a very large market though, because there's still a lot of people who have the PlayStation 2 console. There's still a lot of people who have like a way to play their PlayStation 2 games. So I think there's still a lot of viability in the PlayStation 2. And I also think GameCube is still relatively hot. I think because it's Nintendo, because it's, because it's Nintendo, it's going to kind of fall in that, bracket of desirable games. But when it comes to stuff like Xbox is still very niche. PlayStation 1, I feel like, has fallen into the niche bucket. Dreamcast has also fallen into the niche bucket. And so when it comes to the niche stuff, resellers are not really going for that because they want things that they can sell quickly. Um, and this goes back to some of what that, content creator was saying. He was saying that he was seeing where, people like Phoenix Resale, Chase After the Right Price, Retro Rick, they're diversifying the way that they sell their products, which is smart. It's something that they need to do. But Amazon is really for the fast moving and fast selling items. And then for the more niche items, I could see those being the items that they keep in their store. Now, aside from the resellers, who else is propping up the market? Collectors. Collectors are still the ones I feel like propping up the retro gaming market. And you still have a lot of collectors out there. They're not as loud. They may not be on YouTube. They all don't have YouTube channels. But you still have a good amount of collectors who, if they can find good games at reasonable prices, they'll be willing to pay. You also have a lot of collectors out there who are willing to pay market price for, certain games that they want to have in their collection. But I think that the collecting community is not enough to maintain prices for certain items. What are those items? Those are going to be basically your common games. So if you're basing the market crashing on lower end common games, then, I guess the market is crashing. There are certain retro games that no matter how few people are buying them, whether a lot of people are buying them or whether nobody's buying them, there are certain retro games that are going to always be the same price. And in my opinion, those are going to be like your Nintendo games. It's just hard for Nintendo games to lose their value. Even like, can you see the same thing? Like there are certain Switch games that still sell for almost retail, that came out years ago. If you look at, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity on the Switch, if you look at a lot of the AAA like first party Nintendo games, they're all very close to their original prices. And that's because like Nintendo games just don't go down. And even with some of these common GameCube titles like the Mario Party games, Mario Kart, Sunshine, Luigi's Mansion, Air Ride, a lot of these games have not really budged at all. And it's funny because some of these games are starting to sit. They're sitting on shelves. They're sitting on shelves in retro game stores. They're sitting at GameStop. And when I see that, that does kind of tell me that a lot of the collectors who wanted these items, they already have them. So I would say that there is a softening in the retro gaming market. I don't want to say that there's a crash. And I honestly, I can't see like there being a crash that makes all retro games go down in value. Just don't think that that's something that we're going to see. There's not many copies of Herc's Adventure for the Sega Saturn. There's not a lot of physical copies of this game. So unless someone comes out and decides to make, 100,000 or 1 million copies of Herc's Adventure in this format for the Sega Saturn, will the price for this go down? Yes. Will it ever go down to like $10? Never. At least I don't see it. Guardian Heroes, you're never going to see a copy of Guardian Heroes average for $20. That's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. A lot of people, one of the things that they mentioned was remakes, how remakes are hurting the prices of video games. That is not always the case. That doesn't always happen. Did it happen in the case of Paper Mario Thousand Year Door? Sure. When they released Paper Mario Thousand Year Door on the Switch, it did impact the price of this GameCube game, but it didn't drop it down to zero. Paper Mario Thousand Year Door on the GameCube isn't $20. Is it still like $80 or however much it used to go for? No, but it's not $20. It's still decently priced. It's still at least a $40 to $50 game, right? And it did get a remake, but it doesn't always happen that way. Didn't they just remake Silent Hill 2? I don't see copies of Silent Hill 2 going for 20 bucks. Silent Hill 2 is still a $150 game. You know, it doesn't always, you know, remakes and remasters and re-releases don't always destroy, you know, the value of their, you know, their original print. And when you look at some of these libraries, right, like they're not going to be remaking all of these games. I mean, eventually they're going to run out of ideas and they are going to remake a lot of these games, but I just don't see remakes having that much of an impact overall. Do they impact some games? Yeah, but not all games. So let me know what you guys think. Do you think there's a crash, or do you think it's a softening? Do you think we'll ever see video games go down to zero? I just don't see that. Um, but I do think that now is a not a good time to be a reseller. Like, I wouldn't want to be a reseller right now. I would much rather be a collector. But let me know what you guys think. I'll catch you in the next one. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.